Hey guys and welcome. Today we're gonna go over Faceplant and all of its features. Since the last video, the review that you can see here, I've actually delved into the plugin and I've gone into every little technique and every little feature that it has. And that's what I'm gonna show you here, how to use Faceplant, every single feature of it. Let's go. All right, so to get started, the plugin has a few different sections that we're gonna go over. First is the generators section, in which we're gonna generate the sound itself. Then we have the effects section, in which we can apply effects to the sounds that we've generated before. We have the modulators, and with these, what we can do is we can modulate with oscillators, with envelopes, different settings of the plugin. Then we have the macros up here, which we can route to multiple settings at once and then move the macro to affect all of those. We have the mod wheel, which is just the mod wheel is a macro, except the difference is that the mod wheel is always bound to MIDI CC1. You can use it as a modulation source, as the plugin itself says. So that's the difference. Then we have a few things here: glide, unison, polyphony, master pitch. Then we have a mixer for the 3 lanes in the effects. And then we have a master. And if we click here, a piano roll shows up. And this is the pitch wheel that we can, pitch bend by this value. Bend range is 2 semitones. So if I move it up, 2 semitones up. If I move it down, 2 semitones down. But we could change this to however many semitones we want. Okay, that's the basic overview of the synth. Now, the cool thing about it is that we can create modules within these sections, and then we can route these modules to direct the signal flow in the way that we want. So for example, right now we have a wavetable oscillator, and if we create another wavetable and then an output, as you can see, there's an arrow that goes from the first one to the second one, and then from the second one to the output, and then the output goes to the lanes. Okay, so as we add modules, we're gonna start seeing arrows that are the signal flow of our sound, okay? And we need to pay attention to that signal flow, and we need to set it to wherever we want it to send it. Okay, so what can we do in the generators tab? Okay, we have generators, we have effects, and we have utilities, okay? Generators are oscillators, basically. We have analog, which is saw, square, triangle, and sine. We have noise, which is 3 different noise oscillators. We have a sampler in which we can load our own samples, or we can choose from preset samples. And then we have the wavetable, in which we can choose different wavetables that we have here, and then we can, with the frame, we can scan through the wavetable. Okay, things to understand about the generators here. On most of them, we have level, which is the volume of the wave. Then we have semitones, cent, 100 cents is 1 semitone. Then we have harmonic, which is the ratio of the harmony. So if we're playing a certain frequency and we turn it to 2x, then it's gonna play 2x that frequency instead. And we can do 2.1, 2.5, so on and so forth. Then we have shift, which actually shifts the sound however many hertz up or down as you decide. And then we have phase. You can move the phase up and down, which is, of course, where the sound starts. And the randomness, okay? So plus minus 0 would be it plays the same phase every time. But if we increase the randomness to 180 degrees, it means that it can play 100 degrees up or 100 degrees down and anything in between. So it's completely random. Okay, then we have sync, which is good old sync. And on some of the analog waves, we have the pulse width, which is this thing. Pretty simple. Then we have unison, and when we activate unison, when we increase it, these three knobs light up. What that means is that when we have more than one voice, that's unison, more than one voice, we can detune it, we can spread it in the stereo field, and we can blend it. And blend it would be accentuated the middle one or the side voices. So let's see how it sounds. Pretty easy to understand. And for the analog module, that's pretty much all you need to know. Then in the noise oscillator, we have three different wave shapes. And we have slope, which is actually some type of filter. So, some type of filter. Then we have stereo, of course. And stable and random would be kind of like the phase of the noise sample. So if we click on stable, it's gonna play the same sample at the same phase every time. But if we click random, it will start at different spots every time. Then we have the sample module, in which we can load a bunch of preset samples, or we could load, by clicking on this file here, we can load our own samples, okay? And then we have a few controls here. The root is the root node, and here we would need to know the note of the sample itself and tell Faceplant which note it is in the root node, which, as you can see in the image, we're starting the sample at a later point. Then we have loop, okay? And for loop, we can turn it off. That means it's gonna play once. We can turn it to infinite, in which it's gonna play infinitely. And it's gonna play infinitely within these two white lines right here. That's what's gonna play infinitely. And we can change it with start and length, okay? That's the looping part. And then we can X-fade. So instead of playing straight up a loop, it's gonna fade the next iteration of the loop every time. So we have infinite, we have sustain, which as far as I can tell, it's the same as infinite, but there's probably a difference. Then we have forward reverse, which instead of looping forward every time, it's gonna go forward and backwards. Let's see. Simple. Then we have reverse, which is only reverse. And that's it for the sampler. Finally, we have the wavetable with some of the same controls as the previous ones, but it has a few different things. Okay, band limit is actually a filter. Frame, as we talked about before, is how we scan through the table to get our individual waves. And we have unison, as before. And we have a few things here. Here is where you choose whatever wavetable you want. Okay? And then this little pencil right here is the edit wavetable window. And when we click it, a new window appears. Okay? And in this window, we see up here, basically this is the whole wavetable right here. Okay? That's the whole wavetable. And here in this middle part, we see the individual wave we're looking at. And down here, we see the harmonics of that wave. And here we can edit the wavetable in whichever way we want. So for example, we have free waveform drawing. We have brush tool. We have a wavetable editor in which we can add a wave. And we can choose between sine, saw, triangle, square. We can modify it. So basically we're drawing. Then we have direct harmonic editing, in which we can add or subtract different harmonics. And we have analog style harmonic filtering, which is a filter. Okay. Then we have something called crossfade, and we have linear crossfade and spectral crossfade. What this means is that we can create two different waves and then add waves in between to create a wavetable by doing a crossfade between the two. And the linear crossfade would be based on amplitude, okay? And the spectral crossfade would be based on the frequency spectrum. So two different types of crossfade. Then we have some effects here, a few EQs, some FM effects, sync effects, a comp filter, which is pretty cool, and a few other little effects that we can change the wavetable itself with them. So that's dope. Then we have some fixes that are normalize and remove DC. Normalize is pretty useful. It would push the wave to stay within its frame, you know? And then remove DC, I'm not sure what it does. As far as I've clicked, nothing has happened. Maybe it has, and I haven't realized. But yeah, that's basically the edit wave window. Okay, then we have the effects. We have distortion with drive, bias, and mix. And there are 5 types of distortion: overdrive, saturate, fallback, sine, and hard clip. And then we have the filter, which has a cutoff, a Q, and we have different filters like low pass, band pass, high pass, notch, a low shelf, a bell, and a high shelf. All of those filters. Okay. And then in the utilities, we have the group, in which we can group modules together in order to constrain the signal flow within that group, okay? So the signal flow doesn't escape that group. So for example, if we placed another wavetable here, so 2 wavetables in a row, and then an output, the signal flow would go from the first to the second, and from the second to the output. But if we don't want that, if we don't want the first signal to feed into the second module, we can create a group, and we can put the second wavetable and the output. And right now, the signal of the first oscillator is not going down to the second one. So that's what groups are used for. Just to group modules together and to manipulate the signal flow in different ways. Then we have aux, which, as it says here, route audio to the aux module using the modulation system. So basically we would click in this green plus thing, which is the modulation system. We click here, and then we're basically modulating the aux with our wave. And the only thing it does is it routes it to the aux. That's what it does. And we can increase the level. Let's output it. We can increase the level, and we can invert it. And right now something's happening is that the first oscillator is routing to the aux, and it is also routing to the aux through the aux modulation system. So we could create a group and do this. And now we are only hearing that aux part. Okay, then we have the mix, which works similarly to the aux, except it receives its signal from the arrow, okay, from the signal flow arrow. So simple. And then we have the output, okay? And the output is really important, as you've seen that I've used it many times during this tutorial already. What the output does is it takes whatever signal it's receiving and it sends it to either lane 1, lane 2, lane 3, master, or sideband. By the way, sideband, what sideband is we can use sidechain from that band within the plugin. Lane 1, lane 2, lane 3 are the 3 effects lanes, and the master is the master. We have an envelope here. We can change the attack, the shape of the attack, the shape of the decay, the shape of the release, and all of those things. And that basically modulates the volume of the sound. Okay. Then we have gain and panning. So those are all of the generators right there. And right now I want to talk to you about the modulations because we already touched on them with the aux module. Basically, using this plugin, you can use pretty much whatever you want to modulate some other setting, okay? And in the modulators, we have envelopes, we have LFOs, we have random, which is an LFO except random. And then we have MIDI, which is note, pressure, and velocity. And that basically modulates whatever setting we choose to modulate using the velocity that we're playing our MIDI keyboard with, the how long we keep our note playing, what note we're playing, all of those things. And then we have utility, which we're gonna talk about a little bit later. The envelope, I don't think we need to talk too much about it because it's the same as any other envelope, pretty much. It's very important, this right arrow right here on every single modulator. Okay, it's really important. What this is unipolar, bipolar, or inverted, okay? Unipolar, it means it's gonna take the setting at the point it's in, and then it's gonna push it to wherever we wanted to push it, basically. If we choose bipolar, it's gonna take the setting at the point that we choose, and then it's gonna modulate it not towards the direction we choose, but towards both directions. And then inverted is to the other direction only, okay? So that's really important, okay? How do we modulate? Okay, we click on this plus thing right here, and then we click on any setting we want, okay? Simple. So we could choose, for example, what could we choose? The frame, okay? So as you can see, this envelope is moving the frame along the wavetable. And I'm gonna change the wavetable because this wavetable is pretty static. There you go. And of course, we can modulate as many things as we want, okay? Not just one with each modulator, just as many as we want. And we can do something else. We can take a second modulator, so for example, this envelope, and then we can modulate the amount of modulation that we did with the previous one, okay? So we modulated the frame with this envelope, and now we can modulate how much modulation from that envelope happens with this LFO. And I don't know how this is gonna sound, to be honest. So that's what it is, okay? And we can add multiple modulators to the same setting, so they are added together. Okay, then we have the LFO, which again, We have unipolar, bipolar, and inverted. Very important that we think of that. And we can choose between different few shapes, so sine, square, triangle, saw. We have retrigger, which means that every time we play a new note, it's gonna start from the beginning. We have one shot, which means it only plays once, and if we keep it off, it plays multiple times. And the phase. And we have the speed of the envelope. We can choose hertz, or we can choose to sync it to a certain tempo. And then with this pencil, we can actually go here and edit the LFO in whichever way we want, which is pretty useful. Then we have the random LFO, in which again, we have the speed of the LFO, we can sync it to the tempo, and we have jitter, smooth, and chaos. And we can see what it does in the drawing. That's exactly what it's gonna do. Then, as we talked about, we have the Midi modulators, which I already explained what they do. And we have the utility ones, which are kind of weird, to be honest. It takes a little bit of time to understand them. We have max, min, and multiply, okay? I'm gonna try to explain it as simply as possible. Through these modulators, we're gonna actually input two modulators, okay? So we're gonna have, for example, two different LFOs, or an envelope and an LFO, or a random and an envelope. Just two other modulators, we're gonna input them, one to the input A, so like this, and another one to the input B, okay? We're gonna do that. And what these modulators do, the max one is gonna choose the maximum value of the two. Okay, simply put. So it's gonna take both modulators, the input A and the input B, and it's gonna always choose the highest value of the two and then output that as a modulator, okay? Then we have the min, which is the same, except it's gonna choose always the lowest value of the two modulators. And then we have the multiply, which is gonna take the input A and the input B, and it's gonna multiply them together. So it's gonna output the product of the two modulations. And then we can static multiply it by 0.1, 1, 10. And we need to talk about another type of modulation that is honestly amazing, okay? It's amazing. And that is that we can modulate things using the output of a wave as a modulator, okay? Let's try to picture it. So right here we have this wavetable that is being output through this signal flow, and this other wave that is not being output because, as you can see, there's no signal coming out of it because there's no output. And what we can do is we can take this and use it as a modulator with this plus button. And we can modulate the level. So that would be AM modulation, amplitude modulation. We can modulate the note. We can modulate the frequency, that would be FM synthesis. And we can modulate the phase, that would be phase modulation synthesis. So we have FM synthesis, AM synthesis, and phase modulation synthesis right there, very easily accessible. But not only that, with the distortion and the filter, let's say we apply distortion to the sound and we apply the filter as well. And as you can see the signal flow, we generate our oscillator, it flows to the distortion, then it flows to the filter, and then it flows to the output, and then it's output to lane 1, okay? And what we can do with this is we can take this or any oscillator output and we can do cutoff modulation synthesis. We can do Q, so we can modulate the Q. And we can modulate the distortion, actually. We can modulate the drive. Okay, so those are some of the things that we can do by using the output of a wave as a modulator, which is a pretty cool thing to do. Then, as we can see here, the output is sending the signal to lane 1. And we can choose to send it to other lanes or to the master, but lane 1 is basically an effects lane. And down here in the mixer, it says lane 1 send to lane 2, lane 2 send to lane 3, and lane 3 send to master. So right now the signal flow is going from generators to lane 1, then it goes to lane 2, then it goes to lane 3, and then it goes to the master. Okay? But we could change that, okay? We could make it go to lane, we could, for example, have this oscillator go to lane 2, to lane 1, sorry, and lane 1 to the master. And then we have a second oscillator that goes to lane 2, and lane 2 going to the master. And then a third oscillator that goes to lane 3, and lane 3 would go to the master. And we would be able to apply different effects to different oscillators individually, if we wanted to. Okay, and what can we do in these lanes? Well, we can do a lot of stuff, okay? We have a bunch of effects here, and let's go over some of them. So 3-band EQ, very simply put, 3-band normal EQ. Then we have a big crush. We have carve EQ, which we can open it here and we can EQ in that manner. We have a chorus effect. We have a comb filter, compressor with a sidechain, so we can use sidechain within the compressor and choose the sideband that we saw before. Okay. Then we have distortion, which is very similar to the generator's distortion, with overdrive, saturate, followed by sine, and hard clip. We have ensemble, which adds voices. We have the delay. We have the disperser, which is a really cool effect. What it basically does, as far as I understand from reading the manual, basically it chooses a frequency. Well, you choose a frequency, and then with the pinch you can close the band a little bit or open it up more. And then the amount, what it does, it's applying an effect that what it basically does is it takes those frequencies and it starts rotating the phases of those waves. It's very weird, you should try it. Sometimes it sounds amazing, okay? Sometimes it sounds crazy good. Then we have Saturator, which is just another type of distortion. We have a filter, which is very close, if not the same, as the generator's filter. Flanger. We have a Foreman filter, with which we can achieve those vocal sounds, and very lightly here we can see there are some letters. So the I, E, the O is here, U, you know, many vocals there, and we can change throughout this 2D screen to choose our vocal. Then the Q would be the Q of that filter. We can apply it to lows or highs individually if we want. Then we have a frequency shifter. Very cool. We have gain, just normal gain. A gate, normal gate with sidechain included. A hash effect that we've talked about it in this channel before. It basically makes things sound stereo. Then we have a ladder filter, which is an emulation of a analog filter. We have a limiter. Phase distortion, which as far as I've read into it, it's kind of like FM, but not really. And it kind of sounds like FM. Then we have phaser. Pitch shifter, which is warping the sound, basically. We can choose the grain size. Basically, we're warping the sound. Then we have a resonator, which adds resonances. Reverb. Reverser. It's kind of like a glitchy reverse step thing. A ring modulation. Yeah, that's cool. The slice EQ, which is the normal EQ. Then we have the stereo effect, which we can, we can adjust the gain of the mono content, as it says in the manual. We can increase the width or decrease it. So it's kind of like the Ableton utility, kind of. A tape stop. Okay. Then we have a Trance Gate, which is doing a rhythm. So again, like a glitchy effect. And then we have a transient shaper. It's a very cool one, to be honest. Okay, and we're almost done. We have glide here, we can activate it. And that of course would glide between notes when we're playing them. Auto, it says enabled to glide only when notes are played legato, without a gap in between, okay? So if we enable it, it's only gonna glide when notes are together, without a gap. And if we place a gap, it's not gonna glide. But if we turn it off, it will glide even if notes have a gap. Then we can increase the unison of the master. We can detune it, we can spread it, we can blend it like the other unison. Polyphony is how many voices we're able to play at the same time. So 8 voices would mean that we can play a chord with 8 voices only. If we play 9, the 9th is not gonna output a sound. If we turn it to 1, we have legato and retrigger, okay? And we can read what it does here. Monophonic voice handling. Legato will keep the state of envelopes and oscillators when notes are played without gap, okay? So when we're playing notes without gap, all the oscillators and all the modulations are gonna keep going normally. But if we choose retrigger, they're gonna start every time we press a new note. Everything's gonna start from the beginning. Then we have the master pitch, so semitones and cents. We have the bend range that we can bend it with the pitch wheel down in the left side of the plugin. And we have the master level, okay? The master level down here at the right. And that's the whole tutorial of Faceplant. If you want to get Faceplant for a 5% discount for no particular reason, then go down in the link below and use the code Kithairon, all caps Kithairon, and you're just gonna get 5% off, and you're gonna support my channel a lot, so I will love you eternally for that. But yeah, dude, if you like this video, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and peace!